Hi, everyone. I'm Madison, a third year engineering UT student here with a visual impairment, and I'm honored to represent the UT student body and the students with disabilities community in introducing disability rights lawyer Haben Girma. Her story and drive continues to inspire me and countless numbers of people in the disability community. As the first deafblind person to graduate from Harvard Law School, Haben Girma is a human rights lawyer advancing disability justice. President Obama named her a White House champion of change. She received the Helen Keller Achievement Award, a spot on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list, and Time 100 Talks. Recognized by several world leaders, she believes disability is an opportunity for innovation and teaches organizations the importance of choosing inclusion. The New York Times, Oprah Magazine, and Today Show featured her memoir, Haben, the deaf-blind woman who conquered Harvard Law. Please help me welcome Haben Girma.
Good evening, this is Haben speaking. I'm going to start with a visual description to make sure this is accessible for blind viewers. And throughout my presentation, I will be doing visual descriptions of the videos and photos I share. I'm sitting in my living room, plants in the background, sitting on a sofa, wearing a red top. I'm a Black woman. My family is from Eritrea and Ethiopia. I'm here to talk about the connections between technology, disability, innovation, and also how racism impacts what causes harm when it connects with ableism. For those who don't know, ableism is the widespread assumption that disabled people are incompetent. It's in our schools, in our government, it touches every aspect of society, and it's incredibly harmful. When I was growing up, I heard from the Ethiopian and Eritrean communities, oh, poor thing, she'll never go to school, she'll never get a job. It's not just in those communities, it's also here in the United States. Low expectations for disabled people. When I was in college, I was discouraged from math and science courses. There are assumptions that women can't do math and science, and then when you're a disabled woman and a disabled woman of color, there are even more barriers piled on. And they were enough that I actually chose not to go into math and science and switched majors and did sociology and anthropology. After experiencing so much ableism throughout my early career, I decided to take a stance and do something about it. And I eventually became a disability rights lawyer. Before that, I had to define for myself what it means to be a disabled woman. The dominant narrative is that disabled people are inferior. I rejected that narrative and over time came up with my own narrative, which is shared by many other disabled people. And it is disability is an opportunity for innovation. Many things in our world were developed by disabled people, but we don't know about it because these stories are hidden. It's important to get these stories out so more people recognize it. For example, many people know what Braille is, the reading system that allows blind people to read. Very few people know that Braille was developed by a blind person, a teacher for the blind who was blind himself, wanted his students to have direct access to the written word, and he developed Braille. There are many, many examples of this throughout our history, and I want more people to know about this. I'll share another example. Let's play the first video. So our first video, this is back before the pandemic when I would travel around and visit universities. I went to a school in Mexico to meet with disabled students there. And in this video, I'm signing with one of the students inside a gymnasium. To read his signs, I hold my hands over his hands. And when I'm signing to him, he watches my hands. Deaf communities all over the world have developed sign languages. The dominant one in the US is American Sign Language. In France, French Sign Language. Across the pond in the UK, there's a completely different language, British Sign Language. Deaf-blind communities are also innovative, and we have tactile sign language and protactile, and in the video that highlights tactile sign language. So that's one form of communication. Here's another. Next video. In this video, I'm salsa dancing. And again, this is also before the pandemic. I miss dancing, and it's one of the things I miss the most. Over this past year, I used to go dancing about once a week. When I was growing up, so many instructors assumed that I couldn't participate in physical education courses. Then one summer, I went to a camp for the blind in Napa, California. A lot of people go to Napa for wine, but I go there for camping. And at the camp, there was a blind dance instructor who showed us there are many different ways to engage with music. As a deaf-blind dancer, I can't hear the beat of the music. I can't see the other dancers, but I can feel the beat through the hands and shoulders of the people I dance with. So that's another form of communication taught to me by another disabled person. Disabled people aren't just students, but also teachers and engineers, inventors. And we need to get these stories out there so they could push out the old harmful narratives of disability. When I've been successful, it's because somebody in the community chose to do the work to remove a barrier. If there are no disabled people in your class, if there are no disabled people at your club or organization, that's a sign that there's a barrier denying access to that space. And it's a sign that you should investigate what are the barriers preventing participation from the disability community. I've been incredibly successful in my life because there have been people around me to help do the work of removing barriers and creating opportunities. One of my favorites was a high school teacher. She approached me one day and asked, "Do you want to try surfing?" And I thought to myself, how would a blind person surf? I had never heard of a blind person surfing at that point in my life. I didn't know any Black women who surfed. But I told the teacher, sure, let's give it a try. And so she introduced me to a program in Santa Cruz that does tandem surfing with kids with disabilities. Next video. In this video, I'm tandem surfing. Tandem boards are larger boards. There's a water guide at the back of the board. I'm near the front. The water guide helps steer around surfers and sharks. Just a reminder to everyone, if you have any questions or comments, you can type them in and we'll go over some of the questions in a few minutes. But feel free to send in questions. when I was surfing, I had lots of questions. Can I do this on my own? How does this work? The specific program didn't do lessons. So I reached out to surf schools asking, can I take lessons? And they told me, we've never heard of a deafblind surfer. I found a school eventually that said, we've never heard of a deafblind surfer, but let's try. Let's find a way. So we had to listen. Next slide. And in this video, I'm standing on my own surfboard, and that gives me the opportunity to practice standing up and riding the wave on my own. Beside me was the instructor on his own surfboard. He's nearby so he could help steer under the surfers and sharks. There are so many aspects of a university that people assume disabled people can't join in. Physical education courses, math and science courses, and I dealt with a lot of those negative assumptions, that ableism, when I was going through university. I want us to get to a point where disabled women are not discouraged from joining in math and science courses or physical education courses. And instead of saying no, instructors and university staff ask themselves, how can we make this work? What are the possibilities to make this accessible? I'm going to pause here and check in. If we have any questions so far, Madison will be reading questions. Madison, do you want to come on screen?
Hi, Haben. This is Lori, and I'm actually going to go ahead and give you some questions. We have a couple that were provided in advance, so if it's okay with you, I can jump in and give you a couple of those. So the first one is,
Yes.
Thank you. What was an accommodation or service you didn't realize you needed in college?
Oh, excellent question. So my disability changes over time. I had more vision and hearing when I was younger, and I lost more and more hearing and vision as I grew older. So the tools that I used in elementary school no longer served me after a few years, and I had to learn to adapt. That can be really hard for people with progressive disabilities to develop the flexibility to switch tools when the old tools no longer serve you. So when I reached college, I was still figuring out what works, what would be best for me. And I did not figure out till near the end of college to develop a system, which I now use, and I'll describe it. So for communication, I'm using a Braille display and keyboard. I'm holding up the Braille display. There's Braille along the bottom, and I run my fingers over the dots to feel the letters. And I have a typist typing what's being said so that I can read your words and respond. So there's a delay, Lori, between when you ask a question and when I respond, because the communication is still coming through. So this has expanded access to information for me. And I didn't have it at the start of college. College would have been a lot easier for me. My recommendation to the university is to introduce students to as many tools as possible. It can be hard to know exactly what will work, but if you try out different tools, you'll eventually find something that works. And it helps when schools give students an opportunity to try different things.
Thank you, Haben. I'll do one more question before you continue. Can you talk a little bit about how the pandemic may have created new barriers for you, especially in terms of limited physical contact?
That's something probably a lot of people share. We've all had to physically distance ourselves as much as possible during this pandemic. A lot of my access to information is through touch. And now I have to be more cautious and more aware when I'm traveling around, trying to minimize touching flowers and door handles and so much of the world around us. But we also balance that with washing hands and developing pods of people we trust who also share our values and efforts to minimize spreading the virus. So disabled people have different strategies throughout the US to deal with the pandemic. People who rely on touch, the blind and deafblind community, we're still using our sense of touch and balancing that with being cautious and sanitation. Those are good questions. I want to encourage everyone to feel free to type and send in questions. We'll do another Q&A at the end of the session, and I'm going to continue with my presentation. I was not born an advocate. I came to advocacy over time. And college was a place that sparked my advocacy. I went to Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon. Everything at Lewis and Clark was called Pioneers. Their football team was the Pioneers. The newspaper was the Pioneer Log. The shuttle was the Pioneer Express. So I thought maybe this would be a place that celebrates difference and would encourage me to pioneer my way through the unknown. I was their first Braille reader. So they did not have Braille technology or systems to produce Braille. But once then I was admitted, they took the time to purchase Braille technology, to get a Braille printer, Braille translation software, and one of their reading specialists took the time the summer before I started to learn how to create Braille material so she can provide me with my textbooks and course materials in Braille. They also worked with the outdoor club so I could participate in rock climbing and kayaking. There was just one problem. The college cafeteria had a menu only in print. As a blind student, I couldn't read the menu. And I'm vegetarian. I was vegetarian throughout my last few years of high school and through college, but not anymore. But at the time, I was vegetarian, and I wanted to go to the stations at the cafeteria that served vegetarian food. Those changed every meal, every day. So I went to the manager and I asked, can I get access to the menus in Braille? Or would you post it online or email it to me? I have technology that allows me to access email and websites. The manager said, we're very busy. We have over 1,000 students. We don't have time to do special things for students with special needs. Just to be clear, eating is not a special need. Everyone needs to eat. There's an assumption that there are two kinds of people, dependent and independent. It's not true. We're all interdependent. We know that now more than ever during a pandemic, we all have times in our lives when we depend on other people. And that's okay. Many of you like drinking coffee. Very few of you grow your own coffee beans. You depend on other people to grow the coffee beans. And that's all right, as long as we're honest about the fact that we're all interdependent. So I was eating at the cafeteria without access to the menu. That meant I had to choose a station at random, go to a line, wait in line sometimes for 20 minutes, get a plate, try the food. There were some unpleasant surprises. It was really difficult to try to eat vegetarian when you don't have access to food information. But I told myself, at least I have food. There's so many challenges around the world. Who was I to complain? Millions of people struggle for food. Who was I to complain? After several months, I talked to friends, I talked to advocates, I did research online, and I realized it's my choice. It's our choice to accept unfairness or advocate for justice. So I went back to the cafeteria manager and I told him, the Americans with Disabilities Act prohibits discrimination against students with disabilities. If you don't provide access to the menu, I'm going to take legal action. I had no idea how to do that. I was 19. I couldn't afford a lawyer. Now I know there are nonprofit legal centers ready to help students with disabilities. But back then I didn't know that. All I knew is I had to try. I had to do something. The next day, the manager apologized and promised to make the menus accessible. They started emailing the menus. Through email, I could use my Braille computer and read the menus. If the menu said station 4, cheese tortellini, I could use my white cane to navigate the cafeteria all the way to station 4. Life became delicious. The next year, a new blind student came to the college and he had immediate access to the menus. That taught me when I advocate, it helps all the people who come after me. There are many barriers in our community, barriers impacting women, people of color, disabled people. And sometimes we tell ourselves, oh, it's just a small barrier, just deal with it. There are worse things in the world, just be grateful. The small barriers add up. If you don't do anything about it, the next student, the next person is going to stumble on that barrier. When you take the time to address a small barrier, you build up the skills to master the larger obstacles. The experience inspired me to advocate not just for myself, but for the entire disability community. So I started looking into law schools. Harvard Law told me they'd never had a deaf-blind student before. I told them I've never been to Harvard Law School before. We didn't know what all the solutions would be. We didn't have all the answers, but we engaged in an interactive process to find the solutions and make it work. People ask me, what was the hardest thing at Harvard Law School? The hardest thing was ableism. Again, ableism is the widespread assumption that disabled people are incompetent. During my first semester at Harvard, I was at a networking event, a practice networking event where they were teaching law students how to network and seek employment. So they brought in a bunch of lawyers from Boston to meet with us and tell us about summer internships. I was standing in the middle of the room at a table with my Braille computer, and on the other side of the table was an interpreter with a keyboard, and she was typing and describing what she was seeing and what she was hearing. I asked one of the lawyers nearby to come over, and rather than talking to me, he was only talking to the interpreter. He was telling her, tell her she's very beautiful. That dog must be so smart. Does the dog go to class with her? Tell her she's very inspiring. And I explained to the lawyer that I'm deafblind and reading everything that's being said through Braille. Maybe he will understand what's happening if he types on the keyboard himself. He said, oh no, I'm enjoying watching you both. Tell her she's very inspiring. And he left. He was not inspired to offer me a job. A lot of people use the word inspiring when they feel awkward and uncomfortable around disabled people. Inspiring, the word, is sometimes used as a disguise for pity. And a lot of disabled people are uncomfortable with the word inspiring or inspirational because so many times it's been used to actually put us down. I'm okay with the word inspiring if it's used for positive action. For example, I'm inspired to make my website accessible. I'm inspired to learn salsa dancing. That's positive inspiration. But if you're actually using the word as a way to express pity, that's not helpful. So I ask people, if you say you're inspired, what are you inspired to do? Come up with an action that you will take as a result of this emotion. And for everyone watching this right now, if you feel inspired, pick one barrier in your community and commit to removing that barrier. Commit to helping to do the work to remove that barrier. Inspiration can be a powerful tool to lead to action, and I hope that happens. Like many disabled people, I've seen negative aspects of inspiration, and I'd love our community to move away from that. So that lawyer who told me I was inspiring, he did not offer me a job, but I did end up finding employment as a lawyer. Disabled lawyers do face employment discrimination, unfortunately. After law school, I worked at a disability rights center focused on litigation, specifically with technology. I worked on a case to have a library become accessible to blind readers. There's this myth that the ADA doesn't apply to the internet. It's just a myth. Don't believe it. There have been many cases applying the ADA to virtual businesses. I said I graduated from Harvard Law School, but let's show some proof. Can we have the photo? So this is a photo from graduation. The Dean Minot, is handing me my diploma, and the Dean and I are wearing academic regalia, and my guide dog is wearing a fancy fur coat. Image descriptions increase access for blind individuals. When you post photos online, Instagram, Twitter, include image descriptions so blind individuals also have access. Some history about Harvard. Harvard was not always inclusive. Helen Keller, an incredible deafblind woman, wanted to go to Harvard, but back then, Harvard only admitted men. Helen's disability didn't hold her back. Her gender didn't hold her back. It was Harvard that chose to exclude women. Over time, the community changed and opened its doors to women, people of color, and disabled people. Disabled women have always been talented. It's society that creates barriers. And society can also do the work of removing those barriers and becoming more inclusive. We've come a long way since Helen's time, but there's still more work to do. If you're wondering how to convince people to choose inclusion and invest in accessibility, here are some arguments you can use. Arguments on screen. Argument number 1, you reach more people when you invest in accessibility. There are over 1 billion disabled people around the world. So you reach a larger audience, more customers, more students, family members of students, a larger pool of potential faculty members to join your team. Another argument is digital accessibility is better design overall. When you add image descriptions to photos, captions and transcripts to videos, more text will be associated with your content. Search engine optimization, more people will find your content, both disabled and non-disabled. Another argument, disability drives innovation. A lot of the innovations over the years have been sparked by disability. I described how Braille was sparked by a blind individual. In the 60s and 70s, many disabled people in the city of Berkeley advocated for curb cut access. Curb cuts are the ramps at the end of sidewalks that allow wheelchair users to get on and off the sidewalks. Berkeley was one of the first cities to install curb cuts. It increased freedom and mobility for disabled people. Parents with strollers enjoyed using them. Travelers with luggage appreciated them. Kids with skateboards loved the curb cuts. And now, autonomous robots benefit from the curb cuts. A lot of cities around the country are using delivery robots, autonomous delivery robots during the pandemic. And curb cuts benefit these robots. Back in the 60s and 70s, I doubt they imagined that robots would be using the sidewalks. When you invest in accessibility, you open the door for possibilities you never imagined, and it benefits the entire community. These are some arguments you can use. If the stubborn, difficult person is still not convinced, tell them about legal requirements. Universities are required to be accessible. Litigation is expensive and time-consuming. It's much, much easier to choose inclusion rather than deal with lawyers. I've talked about digital accessibility. I'm going to share a short video that helps illustrate how some blind people use technology, specifically computers. Next slide. So when I'm using my phone, I use VoiceOver. VoiceOver can speak out loud and send information to the digital braille display.
News. Checking for news. National Geographic. Unread. World's largest rodents on lam from Toronto Zoo.
I'm panning right on the braille display using the advanced forward button. If I wanted to instead use hand gestures on the iPhone, I could flick right with one finger. To open an item, I can double tap anywhere on the screen.
Text size. Caption. Title. Title. World's large. Title. After escaping from the High Park Zoo in Canada, 2 capybaras have eluded capture by Jason Biddle. Published June 9. Most people do their best to avoid rodents of unusual size. But after a pair of capybaras escaped from Toronto's High Park Zoo on May alert. Gordon. Hi, I'm at the door. Sushi. Pot of food. Fish cake with swirl design.
My friend's at the door, so I'm just gonna let him know.
Close. Button. Reply. Button. Messages notification. Hang. In. There. I'm almost done with this demo. Send. Button.
VoiceOver has allowed me to access more information, news, mail, and messages, and it's also a way for me to know when friends are at the door.
So that was a mainstream news app, not a separate disabled app. Separate is never equal. It might start out with good intentions, but oftentimes a website or app specific to disabled people ends up getting less updates, less resources compared to the mainstream app. So when people ask, what new services, what new inventions do you want? I want the mainstream services and apps that all the non-disabled people are using to become accessible to disabled people. And the tools to do that already exist. For websites, it's the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Those are a set of standards on how to make websites accessible to blind, deaf, and other disabled people. And for apps, there's Android and iOS accessibility guidelines. Can we go to the last slide? I'm about to open it up for Q&A. I published a book called Haben, the Deaf-Blind Woman Who Conquered Harvard Law. A lot of people say, oh, you overcame your disability. I did not. I'm still disabled. I'm still deaf-blind. It was Harvard that had to overcome ableism. Ableism is the biggest problem I've had to face. And in my book, I share about different stories throughout my life of encountering ableism and how ableism intersects with sexism and racism. Lori, do you want to come back on?
Thank you, Haben. So our next question, you mentioned that your disability has changed over time. How would you recommend that an instructor work with a disabled student whose tools are not working for them over the course of a semester as their disability changes?
Excellent question. I would want to reach out to disability advocates with similar disabilities and find out what tools are they using, what tools are available, and bring as many tools as possible to the disabled student to test out and try out. And hopefully the disability office could also assist instructors in working with students in this process.
Thank you. Next question, in what ways can universities be more proactive in supporting students with disabilities?
Too much responsibility falls on the disabled student and it's overwhelming. Often you feel like you have to juggle being a student, an advocate, and accommodation specialist. It's too much to put on a student, especially when we're all dealing with the pandemic. So this university should shoulder the burden of making the school accessible rather than having it fall on the students. The university should survey the university for barriers, identify the barriers, work on removing barriers. Don't wait for students to tell you about the barriers. Notice them first, work on removing them first. Work directly with professors to help instructors make their courses accessible. Remove the burden from students because students already have too much to work on.
Thank you. So next question, in what ways has intersectionality played a role in your life, work, and advocacy?
Racism multiplied by ableism is incredibly deadly. About a third to half of those killed by police in the United States are disabled Black and Brown people. A lot of law enforcement walk into situations assuming someone will respond in a certain way that they'll be able to see or hear or move or think or feel in a certain way. And when people don't, it's assumed non-compliance. Universities have security as well. There are so many assumptions that come up and around disabled people. And when it's multiplied by racism, that is incredibly dangerous. So that's some of the ways they intersect. Also, a lot of women are discouraged from going into math and science, particularly women of color. We have very few disabled women of color in the math and sciences. And it's partly due to the intersection of racism, sexism, and ableism in those fields.
Thank you very much. All right, next question. What is your advice to welcome disabled individuals in the classroom and not let them feel, quote, othered? Was there a professor in college that made you feel valued in class?
People make me feel valued when they listen. So I've had professors who, outside of class, maybe in an email, maybe during office hours, would ask me, what do you need? How can I support you? Those are excellent questions, and I wish more instructors would do that. And do that in safe spaces, such as one-on-one interactions rather than in large group settings. Some people are very comfortable talking about their disability in public. Others are in a different stage in their journey. And we have to honor everyone in their different stages of the advocacy journey. That makes it easier for them to move along on the journey. So those are some of the things that instructors can do.
Thank you again. All right, our next question came in this evening. What were some of the most helpful resources and accommodations for you when you were going through law school?
The best resource, disabled people. I had a network of blind and deaf friends who I could reach out to. Some of them had already gone through law school. Some of them were currently in law school. So having a network of disabled people you can reach out to people who get it and can empathize and suggest tools and strategies, that's an incredibly powerful resource. When I was in college and law school, there wasn't a disability group. One formed near the end of my law school experience. I think it would have been great to have access to a disability resource group at the university when I was going through college.
All right, thank you. So I think we still have time for a couple more questions. So next, can you talk about how or if career services at any of your alma maters assisted you with achieving your career goals?
Yes, at both. At college and law school, they were incredibly helpful. They were affirming. No one laughed at me at college when I expressed interest in law school. They helped with applications, personal statements, getting references. They were incredibly supportive. That is not the norm, though. I know there are many schools that are discouraging. I came across one of those schools when I was applying to college, when I was back in high school. And there was a college that said, that basically said, you know, it's really hard to get Braille books. It's really hard to navigate a college campus. Are you sure you really want to come here? Are you sure you can do this? I did not go to that school. I wish it was normal for career services to affirm the dreams of disabled students and say, yes, you can. Here are the possible ways of doing it. And some career staff will say, oh, but I've never heard of a blind person doing this, or I've never heard of someone who uses a wheelchair doing Y. If you have never thought of it before, that doesn't mean you can't imagine it happening. Take the time to think about it. Look up what other disabled people are doing. Come up with a plan based on the tools and strategies that already exist, and you'll create something new and discover and learn together.
Thank you. So our next question also comes from an attendee here with us this evening. They say, I am a disabled woman going into therapeutic recreation with a focus on accessibility to sports and exercise. As someone who is very active, what is one thing instructors and clubs can do that you have found would make these activities enjoyable and accessible for you?
It's different for every person. So one fun thing my dance instructors would do is when they were teaching a new dance move or introducing us to a new dance, they'd often use me as the guinea pig. I'm sure there's a more diplomatic term, but when she was teaching a new move, she'd have me learn the move. And everyone else, the sighted students, could watch and learn by watching, whereas I learned by doing. And then in another class, they had an advanced student. The university hired an advanced dance student to be the instructor's mirror, essentially, and physically do what the instructor was doing, and I would follow. So we developed strategies like that. Every disabled student is different. Every deaf-blind student is different. So what works for me might not necessarily work for the next deaf-blind student. My recommendation is to ask the students, what do you need? How can we support you? And come up with a plan based on that.
Thank you, Haben. Next question. Ableism is often covert in nature rather than overt. As many forms of discrimination, people are often unaware or unwilling to admit that they are being discriminatory. How do you advocate for people who suspect they are being discriminated against on the basis of ability when there is not overt evidence?
First, affirm the feeling. If you suspect you're being discriminated against, you probably are. Disabled people and people part of underrepresented groups develop a sense for this because we've experienced it so many times. You develop a sense for it. And unintentional discrimination, unintentional ableism is still ableism.
Thank you. Next, are there any accommodations you've seen institutions such as universities make during the pandemic that you think should continue to ensure spaces remain universally accessible?
There are many disabled people who benefit from remote learning. Not every disabled person, but there are people with specific disabilities where the situation works best for them. And when more learning happens in person, we should still have this flexibility, this option to do remote learning, because some people do best this way, and this is the most accessible format.
All right, thank you. I think we have time for one, maybe two more questions. So the next one is, was there ever a time that Haben in the past needed a pep talk from Haben today? When, why, and what would you say to her?
Levi's actually just had an ad campaign on this. The director asked me, what would you tell your 14-year-old self? In middle school and during the teenage years, there's so much pressure to be like everyone else. And the dominant cultures tells disabled people that we're a burden. My advice to my younger self would be, you are not a burden. Disability is an opportunity for innovation. You are talented. You are brilliant. You will give and serve many different people. That would be my advice to my younger self.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Haben. I think we have come to the end of our time where we need to wrap things up. So thank you so much, Haben, for your fantastic presentation and for sharing insights that teach us so much. There is clearly much more work that needs to be done, but through our own choices and determination, there are many opportunities to be inclusive and to increase access. I want to say thank you also to the sign language interpreters and the real-time captionists for their work in making this event accessible. Before we go, I just want to briefly share information with you about some upcoming events of interest. First, the Delta Alpha Pi Honor Society, with support from SDS, is offering a webinar titled Mental Health and Healthy Men, a conversation with therapist Jimmy Hill. This hour-long webinar will take place on March 30th at 5:30 p.m. Jimmy will speak about his passion for mental health care for men and male-identified persons. Students curious about mental health services, as well as students interested in a career in mental health, are encouraged to attend. Also, we invite you to join us in celebrating International Transgender Day of Visibility by welcoming critically acclaimed poet Torrin A. Greathouse for a virtual reading from her debut full-length collection, Wound from the Mouth of a Wound. This event aims to explore the intersections of disability and identity, and it will take place on March 31st at 4 p.m. So please visit the UT calendar page at calendar.utk.edu or the SDS website at sds.utk.edu for more information and to register for these events. Finally, we greatly appreciate all attendees for taking the time to participate in today's event. We truly hope you feel energized to take what you've learned and use it to the benefit of others. Thank you again, Haben, very much for sharing your time and expertise with us and your experiences. Thank you all again, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.